Photography is tricky. It's easy to do, but it's hard to do well. But there are a lot of things that you can do to try to prepare to make the next photographs. I photograph people who look different, think differently, and act differently than I do. My name is Stephen Marc, and I'm a documentary/street photographer and digital montage artist based in Tempe, Arizona. I grew up in Chicago with Champaign-Urbana as my home away from home. I went to undergraduate school on the West Coast in Southern California and grad school in Philadelphia. The reason I'm mentioning some of these things is the places where I've lived and the experiences I have had make a big difference in terms of how I see and how I work as a photographer. I always like to remember and pass on the words of my old colleague and friend, the late Bill J., who said, "Always leave a photographic situation so that it will be as easy, if not easier, for another photographer to follow in your footsteps." What I found over the years is that the photographer I made it easier for was myself when I encountered people on the street who remembered me, even if I didn't remember them. So I think there's great advice for all photographers, but especially for street photographers. The submitted photographs are not only images from all around the country, but there's also a group of images from my recent book, American True Colors, where I document who we are as Americans, straddling the presidencies of Obama and Trump. There's also another section of brand new work that are digital montages that I don't have a title for now, but I refer to them as the street story montages. There have been numerous American photographic survey projects, most notably the seminal works of Walker Evans' American Photographs from the 1930s and Robert Frank's The Americans from the 1950s. But I didn't want American True Colors to just be an homage and an update of their work, but also a critique. This country has gone through many changes, and we are once again at a very critical point in time in history. I greatly appreciate being able to see the earlier projects, but I know that the America that I would have experienced would have been different. I wouldn't have been able to go to some of the places, experience some of the same things that they did. And not only that, but there's a big difference both then and now in terms of how this country sees me. Coming from a car family culture, I've traveled around the country a great deal. So my project is not a first-time experience of seeing America, but I'm able to compare and contrast what I'm seeing and encountering on my new travels and being able to compare it to the experiences of the past. I don't photograph every day. I would describe myself more as a binge shooter. So there are events that I photograph. There are also times when I go out on the streets and drive around and look where I photograph day after day. But there are other times when I'm just out running errands, going to and from work, and I try to carry a small camera with me so I have the chance to respond to different things that I might run into. So, the thing is that if I'm out there, I see something that's wonderful, don't have a camera. I've got a story to tell you, but not a photograph to show. Recently when I go out to photograph, I carry two cameras. One is a big Nikon DSLR with a 24 to 70mm zoom on it. The other camera is a little Leica Q. And I choose which camera or cameras I use in a situation depending upon what's going on. Without a press pass, if I go to an event where there are a lot of photographers out there, of course, out comes the big Nikon. Looks like I'm a photojournalist. Baseball cap on backwards, act like I'm supposed to be there because I am supposed to be there. And also touch base with the other photographers in that situation. However, if I'm in a place where it's really crowded, and it's going to be a case where I really don't want to have a camera and be that conspicuous with the camera, then the Leica Q is a wonderful piece of equipment. So sometimes I choose which camera is the best for that situation. Other times I'll photograph with one for a while, then switch over and photograph with the other one. So really they're both tools, and it's a matter of which one is the most effective way for me to make the images that I need to. It's not so much about the equipment itself, but having good equipment does make a difference. When you go out to photograph, you have to expect to be challenged. So before going out, it's a good idea to take a good look at yourself in the mirror and think about how somebody who looks like you, dressed like you, carrying the kind of equipment you're carrying. When you're going to that type of event or into that community, who do people think you are? It's a good idea to be prepared to anticipate the questions and challenges and concerns of people coming up to you. Do they think you're an undercover police officer? Do they think that you work for the insurance company? Do they think that you work for the media and possibly a media outlet that they're not in favor of? Do they think that you're a private investigator? So when you go into the nightclub to photograph the couple, and the couple is a little edgy, they don't want to be photographed, don't photograph them. Because it may turn out that they may be married, but not to each other. So it's really important to try to be one step ahead so that you have the ease and the cadence to move through a situation, talk to people, answer their questions, and hopefully be allowed to continue photographing. There are many photographers who like to go out on the streets and photograph and not interact with people. I'm not one of those folks, and I even don't have that option. For some reason, I stick out. I draw people's attention. They're curious what I'm doing. So it's not that I talk with everyone, but I enjoy the conversation. Now, if I went out and photographed a situation or an event, and I didn't know much about it, I would go out with preconceived ideas. I would come back home after making photographs, having the same ideas, having the same thoughts. But by talking with people there, I learn a lot more about who they are, what's going on in the event. And there are times when I photograph people who look different, think differently, and act differently than I do. And I've often referred to them as situational friends, and I greatly appreciate the insight that they've given me, as well as the access to some of the different situations that I've been able to photograph. Without it, once again, I'd be making photographs, but I wouldn't understand the context of the people and the places and the events that I was photographing. I've often been asked if I get permission before taking photographs, but unfortunately on the street, that's almost impossible. When you see something, you have to respond. But if you respond and you photograph and you've upset somebody or they're concerned, now it's time to interact with them. Identify yourself, introduce yourself, talk with them, explain what you're doing. But sometimes, no matter what you do, you can try to explain until you're blue in the face and people just don't get it. So one thing that's really helpful is to carry examples of work with you. I use inkjet paper, make a little accordion book using double-sided tape, put a cover on it, something that's non-precious that can be passed around so people can see what I've done in the past. And that makes all the difference in the world, because it gets past whatever their preconceived ideas are and their fears. They now have something more tangible in front of them. So it's important to remember that when people see you, who do they think they see? In order to be a street photographer, you have to learn to see through the urban camouflage. And it doesn't matter how slow and mundane or fast and exciting a situation might be. As a kid growing up in the Midwest, I'd often go out to try to catch turtles, frogs, and snakes at the local pond. But they were hidden by the natural camouflage. When you first get out there, everything looks empty, stagnant, nothing's going on. But if you slow down, pay attention, and get acclimated to the place, then all of a sudden everything comes alive. So as a photographer, once you begin to see, you now have to magically freeze time, turn form into shape, and fill the rectangle so that you can now share what you've just found. It doesn't matter whether or not you're shooting with film or whether or not you're shooting digitally. You have to study the light. You have to be what I call a light freak. Watch to see how the light changes, how it moves, how it hits a subject. So when I go out, I don't look for the subject first. I first look to see what's happening with the lighting. And then I try to figure out where to start to position myself, where to start to look. Now, of course, there can be times when things change and you have to play the light like it's a poker hand. And so you're going to find that it's not always the light hitting your main subject with the shadow going back and away from you. It may be backlit. There may be something else that's going on there. But at least I start out looking for what I consider to be sort of the more normal or classic lighting. And then I prepare myself to discover what else might happen. And then it's like playing a poker hand to be able to make the adjustments necessary for that. The other thing is, light's not always just fast moving. It's a matter of paying attention to how the light changes from one time, not only one time a day to another, but even from one season to another. So in the places where you live, take a good look and pay attention to how the light moves and shifts and changes as you go from summer to winter, so that you can make the adjustments and find a way to put yourself in the places where you need to be for the lighting. If there's something I really want to photograph, a detail like someone's haircut or a tattoo, in a case like that, I'm going to ask permission because I not only want to get a record of it, I really want to make a good photograph. So I'll often take 2 or 3 shots, show them the image on the back of the camera, and then ask permission to kind of take a few more. The thing is, if they like the image, it's really easy to say, yeah, well, I really like it too. Let me do a couple more to make sure I've got a good one. Photography is tricky. It's easy to do, but it's hard to do well. But there are a lot of things that you can do to try to prepare to make the next photographs. For one, I look at the work of a lot of other photographers. I have stacks and stacks of books, far beyond what fits on the bookcase, and I love to look at different photographers' work. The other thing is that I look at it sometimes just before I go out to photograph. And I'm not trying to copy somebody else's work or emulate what they do, but it's also a matter of educating yourself, getting an idea of what some of the possibilities are. And when I look at work before I go out to photograph, it's a warm-up. You wouldn't find a sprinter stepping into the blocks to run a race without stretching, warming up first. And so I'm doing the same thing visually. When I'm at an event, it's not unusual that I find a group that I want to photograph. So I go up, make a few photographs, introduce myself, stick around for a little bit of small talk. And it's not unusual that I leave jokingly saying something to the effect of, "Don't be surprised if you see me again," or "You haven't gotten rid of me yet." After photographing around the event for a little while, I'll come back and revisit the group, and I might do this several times. Now, if I had stuck around the first time making photographs, they would have become self-conscious. They'd want to know, was I still taking photographs? Was I still there? And they'd get annoyed. But by leaving and coming back, it changes everything, because now when I come back, they're used to me. They're accustomed to me being there. And not only that, but when I return, I'm often greeted like I'm an old friend. In addition to photographing everyday life on the street, I often focus on special events. These can include political rallies, social justice protests, cultural events, and historical commemorations. When photographing at home, there are several events that I've had the opportunity and the privilege of being able to photograph more than one time. And I greatly appreciate these because when I go back to photograph an event a second, third time, it takes all the pressure off of me. I don't have to photograph, so it allows me a lot more time to talk to people, interact, enjoy the event. But more importantly, it allows me to make photographs that I may not have made before. I don't have to make photographs, so I'm put in a wonderful situation where I have everything to gain and nothing to lose with the next images that I make. There's a saying that photographs lie, but photographs don't lie. They just take things out of context. Who you really have to worry about are the photographers, because photographers can lie. So when you read an article, it's not only important what you read, but you also want to know who is the journalist that wrote the article, and how much can you believe in them. Well, it's the same thing for photographs. When I make straight photographs, I want them to be representational. I want to create a byproduct of what I experienced as a witness. So I respect what documentary photographers, photojournalists, and street photographers are trying to achieve in their imagery. However, I'm also a digital montage artist, so the current work is a combination of straight photographs and digital montages, where the straight photographs are the traditional 2:3 ratio rectangle, like a 35mm, and the digital montages are a 1:3 ratio, which allows me a little bit more room with extended space for storytelling. There are several strategies that I use for creating the digital montages. Some of them are panoramas that just extend the space. Others are more time-based, where several photographs are combined from the same event. I also look at common themes that may happen in different places that are pulled together in a single image. And then there are times when completely new relationships are created from unrelated events. And yes, there are times when the digital montages seem closer to my memory of the events than the individual photographs by themselves. After several photographic sessions, it's time for me to stop and take a good look at the work. And it's not just a matter of me editing and processing the images, it's also a matter of me seeing how the work fits together. Am I making the same photograph over and over? Is the work moving forward? but also to take a look at to see if there are any holes, any spaces in the work, things that I need to be aware of the next time I go out and photograph. I really appreciate being able to share my work, and I know that people define me and judge me based on the work that I've already done. But the way I see it is, I'm only as good as the next photographs that I take and the next montages that I build, and what I'm counting on is that I haven't made my best work yet.